Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm doing something new for my listeners. So you're going to see me. I would also put this on YouTube. I have a guest today, Greg Schaffer. He is a cybersecurity expert based out of Tennessee in the United States. And we've met with Greg over a platform and I've seen his experience. So I thought, why not to get the experience of Greg for us here in Dubai and in the Middle East. So, Greg, can you please introduce yourself to us?
Thanks. I am Greg Schaffer. I'm the principal of a consulting firm called vCISO Services here in the United States. We provide virtual chief information security officer consulting and information security risk management consulting for small, mid-sized businesses. Been doing that now for about 6 years. My experience, just very briefly, I've been in IT and information security since the late 80s. So I've been doing this for quite some time and in various also chief information security officer roles, including a university, a bank, and the city of Nashville, Tennessee. I was their first CISO back 10, 12 years ago, something like that. But then I pivoted and became cybersecurity consultant. It's really my drive to help with small and mid-sized businesses. I should also mention too that I am a host also of a podcast called The Virtual CISO Moment, where we do the same thing, where we talk with cybersecurity pros every week. Every Tuesday we drop a new episode, so it's a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be here. It's nice to be on the other side of the questions for once.
Good, good. Thank you for being with us today, Greg. My first question to you. So you've been a CISO for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm
And
an old guy, so yeah.
so one of the things that I try to focus on in my podcast usually is not talking to technical people, but also talk to, you know, the other side of the business, the decision makers, the stakeholders. So the first question I want to ask you from your experience, like how, in a simple way, you can, explain the term of cybersecurity or information security to someone who might not be very much technical.
Well, that's, I think, one of the most difficult things of being a CISO. And I think a lot of people don't master it because really it's our responsibility to learn the business language. So you can't go in there. Nobody at the board or the C-suites, none of them are going to care about like how many threats that you had, how many threats did your firewall block, for example. It's like if that was 1,000 or 100,000, what does that mean? It's like you're giving them the what, but not the so what. Tell me what this means to the business. And the only way you can do that is that you have to have a responsibility of learning the business first. So whatever vertical you're in, whatever the business does, if it produces little widgets or if it's a service-oriented business or what have you, the security officer needs to understand the business first, because then from there, now they can speak the language of the business leaders. And that's really the key there. So when you're talking about threats, okay, firewall blocked 10,000 things last year. Well, okay, what does that mean to the business? Well, we've noticed an uptick in attacks, actually, because our threat intel tells us that we're getting more and more intrusions from X area of the world that we think is related to this service that we just implemented, because that now has some information that folks might want to try to exfiltrate. You see what I'm saying? It's a very simple example of tying together a technical aspect, which they don't care about, the board, the C-suite, with what the board and the C-suite does care about. And there's no simple way to really do that outside of, look, that's one of the reasons why CISOs get paid a lot of money. It's because it's not just understanding the technical stuff, it's understanding the soft skills and the business stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. And from also your experience, and because you've done it as a customer and now you're doing it as a consulting perspective, what do you think are the major challenges that CISOs nowadays are facing? Like what's letting them stay awake at night, I would say?
Well, one of the issues I think we have in an industry is that it seems like that we've learned as a CISO to go into a job, figure out one big thing to help fix it, implement that thing, and then move on. The average tenure of a CISO in a position is short. I think, I don't know an exact number. There have been studies and all that, but 18 to 24 months. And it takes time to just learn the business. And I think that the biggest challenge that a CISO has is don't go in trying to fix something right out the gate. And sometimes that's sort of anti what they're being asked to do, because a lot of times when a business goes out and hires a new CISO, it's because either they had a breach and they didn't have a CISO before, or they had a breach and the previous CISO was either left or was asked nicely to leave. So I think that the challenge there is to approach a position with longevity. If you want to be there for some time, you want to help make a difference and really get in, because without getting into and understanding the business, I'm kind of going back to what I was saying beforehand, you can't really be effective. You cannot just buy a tool, put it in and say, this is going to solve all of our problems. Trust me, I'm a CISO. And unfortunately, I think that the CISO mindset isn't quite there yet for a lot of chief information security officers. I think that they're of the mindset, I'll go in, I'll try to fix, and then I'll leave. And therefore make more money as you go up the chain, as you continue to leave. And I don't think that does the security industry a service at all. And it doesn't help with the businesses. We're trying to solve a problem. And I don't think that approach is the right way to solve a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. And because I'm talking too much about the challenges, because I know it's not an easy job, talking to also from my perspective to customers. So what are the main challenges that they need really to face and try to solve on whether daily basis or on the long run? What do you think are the major challenges for CISOs today?
Well, this is kind of one that's been around for a while, and unfortunately, I think it's still here. Is the friction sometimes between information security and information technology. If you have someone leading information technology who is a very strong-willed person that can get very defensive, they're less apt to accept what the CISO might be saying. And conversely, the CISO shouldn't be telling the CIO what you have to do. They should be working collaboratively. They should be working together to figure out what the best technical controls are, because information security is not just about technical controls. I get that, but it is such a huge component. And if a CISO walks into a position and there's that immediate friction with information technology to begin with, then you almost lose the battle, if you will. And you can extend that really to any part within the organization. Sometimes, like the CFO will look at security as a cost center. It's like, what are you really adding to the business here? You're just asking for a lot of money, and I don't see any results. And so one way to get around that is to show value by doing quantitative risk analysis, like using a methodology like FAIR, the factor analysis of information risk. And by doing that, it all kind of ties back to people seeing that you are not just focused on the technical aspects of blocking stuff and security, but you're actually trying to promote the business growth. And you're going through all the process of understanding. It's like, so you go to the CFO, it's like, I understand that, look, $200,000 for this tool for a year is a lot, but our cost exposure without the tool is $500,000.
Yeah.
And it makes sense then to buy that tool, to spend that money.
That's really informative. Another question that came to my mind, and this is something I see it on a daily basis sometimes as well. So when we talk about large enterprises, these guys, they have enough budgets, enough consultants to do the stuff that they do. But sometimes, and I'm sure if you have seen it also yourself, when we talk about like the smaller enterprises, so sometimes we see, this question comes up. Why do I need this? Should I do cybersecurity, countermeasures? What's your, and sometimes people, they don't get really the risk behind it. So usually how, or what do you advise owners of small businesses or like, let's say, medium-sized enterprises? What's your advice to them?
Well, I think that they should look into a virtual CISO service firm or provider. And I don't mean to make this a commercial, but we're one, vCISOservices.com is our website. But what a virtual CISO can do in that case is provide that sort of leadership and guidance and experience to inform them of what they pragmatically would need to do. Because one of the better aspects of a good virtual CISO is that they understand, look, you don't have unlimited budget, and that's good. I get back to the other CISO challenge where it always seems like, oh, let's just buy this big tool and put it in and see if it works. You'll never have that with the small and mid-sized businesses, and you really got to be good about understanding their business. So you look for a virtual CISO that understands risk management and is not as so much a technical virtual CISO. It's a very crowded field in some ways right now because there's a lot of folks that are providing what one person on my podcast, when I asked the question, well, what's a significant threat for small and mid-sized businesses? He came back with what I think is one of the best answers. He said, bad advice. And he's right, because if you contract with someone or you bring in a firm to help you build your security program and they're providing you advice that is substandard, you've not only not moved forward, but you could very well have moved backward and spent a lot of money in the process. So I'm not saying that small and mid-sized businesses need a virtual CISO per se. That's one avenue. It's certainly a very cost-effective avenue because you're getting the experience of folks like me who have actually done this in the full time for many, many years. But whatever you do, A, do something, and B, research and make sure that you're not going down the wrong path. However way you need to get there, that would be my suggestion.
Cool. And another point I want to ask you about, and you touched on it, but just to re-emphasize on it, is about, because when we talk about IT in general, we talk about total cost of ownership, ROI, and sometimes in cybersecurity, it's not that straightforward. So what's your advice for people who really understand that, yes, this is something that we need to implement, whatever the technology is, but from cost perspective, we cannot show it, right? So it's not like we're replacing some hardware with something new, we're reducing the cost. So what's your advice to like decision makers, I would say, to justify that to the business?
Well, I think you need to have some sort of a methodology for determining the cost of a particular risk. So it can be as simple as you do your risk assessment. This is one of the basics of an information security program. You do a risk assessment, you look at your inherent risk, and you can also add a cost estimate to that. You can do it as simple as like 3 basic levels. It's like low cost if this risk is met, if this risk actually occurs, medium cost, and high cost. And you can assign like some range of numbers there. And then you get a little bit of a better idea of like, okay, well, business email compromise for an organization that does a lot of wires, for example, and you don't have good email controls in place, you don't have 2-factor authentication in place for that. Okay, that's a big risk for businesses that wire money all the time. And if they don't have 2-factor, which is a relatively small cost of implementation, you can easily see that the cost to fix that, if you will, is a lot less than the cost exposure. That's the key word here, is cost exposure. Now, I mentioned FAIR beforehand. That's going a little bit more structured, if you will. The bad thing about risk assessments, qualitative risk assessments, is that it's basically a graphical or a spreadsheet representation of a subject matter expert's opinion. That's all it is. It's very subjective. It's not rooted in a methodology. Now, if you go to something like FAIR, at the very least, you're taking a lot of elements of a qualitative risk assessment, and you're adding some quantitative elements to it. So you can then look at what is my cost exposure for something. I'm not going to go through the FAIR taxonomy at this point. I mean, you can go very deep into this. It's a lot of fun sometimes. But whether you do that or you do just a very high level qualitative risk assessment with some basic ranges of costs associated if that risk is realized, you have to have some way, because again, the business owners they don't understand. They'll understand what is the cost, what is the risk if we do not implement a particular service, for example. Okay, so in business terms, you have the cost of implementing a service, like you want to offer you want to offer penetration testing if you're a security firm, for example. Okay, so that's a good thing. You're going to have like revenue come in, but it's going to cost money to get the tools to do penetration testing. It's going to cost money to secure the assets, the personnel that have the skill set to do that. But so you have the costs associated, but you can definitely have a higher revenue stream coming in. So that risk is like a risk of opportunity. Now, business leaders understand the risk of opportunity. Opportunity risk is like, what happens if we don't do anything? We lose the opportunity to increase our revenue. So if you speak in that language, it's like it's all the same thing. It all comes down to cost exposure and where it makes sense to spend the company's money.
Yeah, that I agree with you. Like it's always like cost of doing nothing, as I call it, versus
yes.
Yeah.
And the cost of doing nothing, is particularly in security, can be huge. It's like, you had people not too long ago who didn't have firewalls up on their little small networks, and the cost of doing nothing for folks that didn't have firewalls, well, that was pretty bad.
Yeah,
that was some years ago. I think if you're a small business out there right now and you have a little network and you don't have a firewall and I'm sorry, get a firewall.
yeah. Get the firewall or you will be wiped out of business, wiped out.
Yeah,
right? So,
exactly.
yeah, and I've seen a lot of like something that came to the wire and where businesses were hit by malware or so, and it was done. Game over for them. So they could not. Yeah. So I've seen many times.
Mm-hmm.
Before the last question, I have a question that just came to my mind, and I think you follow on the new trends of technology, and this is something that also I do in the podcast. So now everyone is talking about AI and the use of AI in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Personally, I've seen some articles, some of them, they were scary, but how do you see the evolution of AI from both sides? I mean, from the offensive side of it, I mean, from cyber threat actors, and from the good people, the CISOs, and everyone who is on the good side, I would say.
Well, I think the first thing we have to realize is that AI, Chat GPT, and those sorts of things, that they're just tools when all is said and done, and they're good tools, and just like tools, they can be used or they can be abused. I think one of the risks, at least on the good side, is too much reliance on it. I see folks that are using Chat GPT to like say write their policies, write their marketing, and all of that. And there's a good component to that because you can do that to give yourself a good baseline. But there's the danger of relying too much on technology, and you start to lose your own abilities to do this sort of stuff, to be able to defend against folks and this and that, because ultimately artificial intelligence is just that. It's artificial, and you don't have the inputs, at least today, or the gut feeling about, sometimes it's that gut feeling about something just doesn't feel right here. You can't get that with AI. I don't think you ever will. For the bad guys, unfortunately, this is making things a little bit easier for them. It's but we've been down this road before. If you know the term script kiddies, right?
Yes.
So before script kiddies, information security, cybersecurity was a lot about folks that really knew what they were doing and they were weaving their way in and so forth. But then sometimes they started to package these things in scripts, and then you could have someone who has no experience whatsoever take a script and just run it against things. And AI is kind of the same way there. It's like you're going to have people that don't really have that fundamental knowledge that are going to try to use this to run it. Are they going to be able to do more bad stuff with it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But it has the same effect on them as well, where they're not really promoting their own skills, and their skills will atrophy. And so it's interesting to see where AI is. I think it's overhyped right now. It's a good tool, but it's a tool, just like any other tool, screwdriver, a pen, what have you. It's wonderful. It's going to be here forever. Just like computers. I mean, computers, we didn't have computers 50 years ago, in our pockets. We didn't have smartphones like 20 years ago in our pockets. The most powerful computer right here, is more powerful than everything that NASA used to land on the moon back 50
Right.
odd years ago. And but we haven't destroyed ourselves because of technology. We won't destroy ourselves with AI, but it's going to be an interesting story to watch over the next couple of years. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I have to agree as well. And just on the point that the script kiddie stuff. So you know that there are some people who offer that as a service. So for example, ransomware as a service. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
And here you can have like almost like AI ransomware as a service. And the bad guys are after one thing. They're not after your information. They're after money. I mean, when all is said and done, it's all about money.
right.
And if they can monetize AI, they will.
Exactly. I agree with you. And the other thing, what I'm expecting is to see a little bit of AI fighting AI, maybe. But as you said, but as you
Oh,
said, because they are just tools, right? So I believe still the human factor will be playing the biggest role in that. So
so
that's
if
my
you add
expectation.
AI into like drones and droids, you're going to have like, almost this sci-fi issue of like having droids, like, like those robotic dogs that you see people are developing. You're going to have dogs fighting each other, and then drones with AI coming in and fighting and this and that. And it's I don't know, that sounds a little scary. Maybe I've watched too much sci-fi. I don't know.
Uh, for me, as long as like AI doesn't have like it's not conscious, I would say I'm fine, because actually one of the episodes I discussed that for the time being, you can take some guidelines from ChatGPT, for example, if you want to do a pen testing, but
Mm-hmm.
actually it will not help you doing the pen testing because it lives in the past. It's up to 2021, as we know. So it's not aware about the new vulnerabilities. It's not aware of what's happening, around. It cannot actually go and do a DNS check, for example, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going a little bit technical, but that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Now, the last thing I want to ask you, every report, every trend article I read, I see that there is shortage in cybersecurity skills, and people hesitate sometimes. Should we go and study cybersecurity? Should we go to this? And for someone who's very experienced like you, like, what's your advice that you can give for someone who is really interested in cybersecurity, and your all overview on the shortage in the market today?
Well, I think part of this can be applied to just about any industry. I think the first thing that you need to ask yourself, and this at any stage in your career too, is why do I want to do this? What am I? What's driving me towards cybersecurity? Is it the money? Is it the glory, if you will? Is it the challenge of trying to show that there are vulnerabilities? Is it the challenge of trying to protect against vulnerabilities? I think that there's so much out there in cyber right now that people get really lost, and they tend to be all over the place. Because if you figure out your why, then you can start to figure out your the actual discipline within cyber that you want to do, because cybersecurity has become like the medical field. You have your general practitioners who know a lot of stuff, but not very deep. And then you have all your specialists along the way. I mean, I don't want a dentist working on my heart. I don't want a cardiologist pulling my wisdom teeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, do you want to be a surgeon and actually work on a heart? Do you want to pull people's teeth? Do you want to do mental health? Those are disciplines within the medical field that you have to figure out your why and what's interested to you. And I think that people don't understand that fully within cyber yet. They're like, okay, there's just it's such a broad field that I just want to be in cyber. So figure out your why, then figure out your discipline, and then talk to people. Talk to people who have gone down that path. Again, like the podcast you're doing, the podcast I'm doing, part of the reason why I do my podcast, to share stories with people who've gone down those paths and made those decisions. Some of them become more technical, some of them become CISOs, some of them are in GRC, but just talk to people. But don't follow my path, because cybersecurity didn't exist back in the dark ages. I mean, I started in 1989, and we didn't even have twisted pair Ethernet at the time. So
Yeah,
that would be my advice.
that's great. And actually, it's very logical, I would say. It's not only for choosing a career, it's quite for everything in life. You need to start with why. I'm a huge believer in this, as per Simon Sinek. Really, Greg, I appreciated the chat today. I highly advise my audience to tune in. Can you remind us about your podcast name and where they can find more about yourself and your services, Greg?
So the podcast, you can go to any podcast platform. It's called the Virtual CISO Moment. And
I'll put the link.
I appreciate that. We're also on YouTube, YouTube/@vCISO. And our company page, where you can learn more about us, is vcisoservices.com, vcisoservices.com. We'd love to have you. And if you have any questions that I can answer, contact me through there. You can also contact me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find.
Great. I will add you first also.
Okay.
That was a very interactive, very, I would say, informative session with you, Greg. I highly appreciate your time today. For my audience, I hope that you like this format. It's my first time I'm having guests. I promise you that I'm bringing some cool guests, and I hope that you found this episode very informative. Stay tuned with another guest in the very soon, and I would see you again in the next episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Bye-bye.